What's good, folks? Welcome to the second Cover One Film Room episode of today, Wednesday, April 3rd. This show being, of course, the only show that gives you the hows and the whys behind both the good and the bad of the Buffalo Bills. I'm one of your two hosts, Anthony Prohaska, joined as always by Eric Turner. And
Yeah.
Eric, I say the second episode today because our schedule is aligned, ironically, very well for us to be able to go live midday today, Wednesday, April 3rd, which proved to be a pivotal day for the Buffalo Bills, which you should have known because every Wednesday seems to be some sort of impactful or dramatic thing for the Buffalo Bills. Mike Edwards signing a couple of weeks ago, Stefon Diggs today, the Red Wedding several weeks ago. Eric, we went live earlier today on a topic that we're going to talk about a little bit to start this show, but man, Stefon Diggs, no longer a Buffalo Bill. Apparently there was fire to that smoke. We broke down a ton of aspects of it earlier in today's episode, along with Chris Trapasso, who was kind enough to join us. So if you folks want a full breakdown on that, what it means, all the breadcrumbs, puzzle pieces, what it can mean schematically going forward, we have you covered with a very in-depth hour and 25-minute episode that we recorded earlier today. So feel free to check that out later after this episode. But Eric, we're going to talk about that a little bit before getting into, ironically, a very well-timed episode.
Yeah,
getting
it's a
into
jumping off point.
right? To get into some wide receiver film, comps, and some advanced metrics pieces and everything, and conversation around the wide receivers in this 2024 draft class, which the Bills now suddenly need multiple of if they didn't already before. But Eric, let's lead with that Stefon Diggs piece. We talked about it earlier. I think we've kind of had the ability to breathe a little bit, or maybe not. I'm still pretty shocked, but nonetheless, here we are. And Stefon Diggs is a member of the Houston Texans, and it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, it was obviously shocking news, and the type of news that when this scrolls across your phone on Twitter, you're like, that's not real. Let
Is
me
it April
double check this
Fool's? Like,
source.
is this the fake Schefter?
Yeah, exactly. And so, the news of the Bills trading Stefon Diggs, who obviously was extremely crucial to the development of Josh Allen, to his ascension to a franchise quarterback. They made that splash trade for him years ago, and it was the perfect timing for that. The timing of this trade was not as good. It was not as good, especially considering we were prepping this show for the wide receivers and the comps, their skills and their traits for many weeks now. And because, the Bills are going to look to add at least one or two wide receivers in this draft. But now, after this move, like, it's pretty much solidified. Yes, or the Bills I'd be surprised if they don't come out of this draft with two. So this move, sending Diggs to Houston, obviously has a major impact on the draft, which is what we're going to talk about here tonight. But it was definitely shocking to see Diggs sent out, out of town, out of Buffalo, to a certain extent, right, Anthony? Because for years now, we've heard rumors behind the scenes. We've heard stories behind the scenes, some details behind the scenes of some sort of friction or unhappiness or lack of accountability between Diggs and Allen in many ways. And it seemed like it came to a head finally. And this was the year to send him away. I honestly, they should have kept him probably. They should have kept him for this year and dealt with, especially with what they got back, a 2025 second round pick, and then gave up a couple picks this year with that. So it was shocking to see and hear. But based on some of the stuff we've heard the last couple years, it's only to a certain degree behind the scenes.
Yeah, we spoke about several kind of behind the scene pieces earlier in today's episode, and some things that were known, some things that were not. Although if you are a Cover One insider, you would have known a bunch of these pieces already
for a while.
Yeah, a little bit. And this, even with us knowing that, right, it still just seemed a lot of kind of, what is it, much to do about nothing. And yeah, Joe B with that quote earlier, I was listening to the presser. That was one that stuck out with me. We talked about it early on today's show, and there's Brandon Bean right there saying, like, are we better today? Probably not. And then he followed that up with saying, like, I just hope people know I'm competitive as hell. We're going to do everything that we can to work through this, so on and so forth. And I think that's really where we're at with it. You're not a better football team with Stefon Diggs not being on this roster, even if, and we broke down a lot of pieces schematically earlier today, even if they are moving in a different direction schematically, it would still be nice to have Stefon Diggs on the roster.
Yes.
And I think even within that, knowing the dead cap hit you were going to incur, it was like, okay, just keep him on the roster anyway. Like, again, if he's happy and fine and everything's okay. This meet to me, and we talked about it earlier, like it just signaled that things just really came to a head from an off the field perspective. Because again, even if you are moving in a different direction schematically, even if you think Stefon Diggs lost a step and didn't play well down the stretch, and you think he may be washed, so on and so forth, based on the money and based on what he was to this team and based on not creating a roster spot, from a roster perspective, it really made absolutely no sense to get rid of Stefon Diggs. Monetarily, it made no sense, which means it really had to be driven by something culturally and a toxicity. Again, tying back into all of those where there's smoke, there's fire potentially. And, Bean did a lot of GM speak and coach speak today, but there were some interesting nuggets, Eric, that you had pulled up there that we people, and we'll see kind of where they go going forward. But it now puts wide receiver firmly in the crosshairs, if it was not already, as a position of need for this team, given the departure of Stefon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Ed Sherfield, Deontay Hardy, and you've replaced them with Curtis Samuel and Matt Collins, but now you're sitting there looking to kind of bolster this group and also address some of the top end spots at the wide receiver position for this year and especially beyond.
Right. And here's our depth chart now, guys. Here's our current depth chart.
So much more blue, and now there's a red in the X.
There's a big missing link at that X wide receiver spot. You can say what you want about the drop off in production from Diggs. We've talked about the different ways that Josh Allen missed Diggs, and if he hadn't missed Diggs on a lot of deep balls, maybe there's not even a conversation when it comes to the lack of production. You can talk about how Brady did or didn't use him, or how he used the other guys to distribute the ball around, the Shakirs of the world, the Dalton Kincaids, James Cooks, and how he got them involved. Whatever way you want to spin it, the Bills are now missing an alpha wide receiver. They're missing an X wide receiver. And I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, Diggs, his production fell off. He lost his skills from, 1 week, one half of the year to the other. I don't think that's the case at all. Whether there was some off the field stuff that he was in his head, whether there was some kind of injury that wasn't totally disclosed, or if it's Brady's fault. Either way, guys, this was a tough trade to swallow because of the hole that was created when Diggs was traded. So the Bills need an X. Were they looking for an X anyway? Yeah, they were looking for a future X anyways. But now I think that 100% solidifies the fact that they're going to have to look for at least 2 receivers in this draft. And one of those guys will have to be a future X, if not an X sooner rather than later, because the Bills offense is going to need it. Curtis Samuel is not a number 1. Curtis Samuel is not Diggs, but younger. I'm sorry. I don't know where that came from. Someone, was saying that in the Slack channel. Those two have never been the same.
No.
From the point they came out of college to now, even in Diggs, up over his 30s, they've never been the same player. So I don't know where that came from. I just know Curtis Samuel has never been a 1, isn't a 1, and I don't want him running X, as an X wide receiver consistently. Can he do it here and there? Yes, we showed film. We've broken down film, showed you how a coordinator can do different things to, present him as an X, but getting him advantageous looks as an X. I don't think he is a full-time X. So the Bills do have to come out of this draft, aside from maybe pulling another trade before or after.
Yeah,
the Bills got to come out of this draft with some type of future X on top of another receiver that can essentially take a Shakir type role when we're talking next season.
Yeah, it's a spot we talked about going back to the Senior Bowl, that desire for that X position and that specific type of role. It's part of the reason we gravitated towards Javon Baker. But now it becomes even more of a necessity. Before, you could have gotten away with, if you really like Lad McConkey, sure. If you really like Xavier Worthy, sure. Like that could work. Yeah, exactly. Like a luxury. And then maybe you figure the X spot out next year or the year after if Diggs really falls off a cliff or everything goes super sideways. Like you could still get away with it. Now, exactly to your point, it becomes a specific need. You need that specific skill set, those specific traits. You are looking for a specific body type, a specific play style, a specific skill set that isn't necessarily super prevalent across this wide receiver class. Like we talked about earlier with Chris, for as deep as this wide receiver class is and as fun as it is, the presence of true X receivers is not something that this wide receiver draft class is littered with. Now, the other side of that makes it a little fun, you do go receiver in round 1, you can have a lot of fun options in the round 4 if you want to go wide receiver at 128 or 133, and maybe Malik Washington is still there, or Taj Washington is still there, or maybe you double down on the X spot and you go with Marcus Rosenby, Jack Saint, something like that. Like, there's some fun options there. But if you're addressing wide receiver early, it almost thrusts into the forefront the Brian Thomases, the A.D. Mitchells, the Javon Bakers, the Xavier Legettes, like these specific body types, frames, sizes, skill sets, and play styles versus a lot of the other receivers that you may have liked, or I may have liked, or other fans may have liked. But now, because of the need and what the wide receiver room looks like, you have to pivot. We continue to say that, build your wide receiver room like a basketball lineup. They need a power forward now. Like, they've got guards. That's fine. You need some bigs. You need guys who can rock in the paint. They do not have that presence, and they need it now.
And two things that I want to talk about that, resonate with me looking back at these tweets from March 19th or so. One, if you look at the lower tweet here, it says, Diggs called this touchdown in the meeting rooms. I was told that he was ready for this technique by the defender, that press jam technique. He's like, when this defender does that to me, I'm going to smoke him at the line of scrimmage. And he did. That's the first thing I want to talk about, because with Diggs not being in the lineup, you can talk about the production. We showed, how many targets and all the stats that Diggs has had the last 4 years. But this type of stuff, the experience, the understanding, Khalil Shakir talked about and credited Diggs with so much of his development this past year and his glow up. And this is the type of stuff that is not in the wide receiver room anymore. All right. This type of experience and film study and understanding how to win, it's not in the film room anymore. So that impact is one thing, aside from, hey, they need an X, they need to draft someone. This is being lost from the room. The other thing, when discussing X, something to keep in mind, for this show, when we're talking wide receivers, and it's always going to end with, okay, is he a future X or not? Diggs was pressed the 5th most last year for 398 snaps. So he was pressure jammed in man coverage 201 snaps. That was number 1 in the NFL. So man coverage, presser jammed 201 snaps last year. They need an X. And this is really the core of what an X wide receiver does.
Javon Baker.
Being able to win early. When you're an X, a lot of times you're split out, you're isolated by yourself. You're usually on the line of scrimmage. You're subject to being pressed at the line of scrimmage, like you see here. You have to be able to beat press. And so there's only a few guys in this draft that can do it, especially if we're talking year 2 projections. Maybe year 3 and 4, more guys develop into X's. But early on, being an X is all about beating press man coverage. Diggs faced it a lot. I don't expect that to change. In fact, they may see it more across the board now because they don't have an early separator against press man like you see here from Diggs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like all those little aspects, like a strong release package, and part of the reason why I did, cough Javon Baker is because of that aspect of his game. That's 1,000% something that they need. And if they don't have it, and teams know that they can be had and they can get got by just simply, pressing or jamming them at the line, that's something that they're going to spam the absolute hell out of. We saw issues with the Bills versus man coverage last year in terms of separating and being able to win against that coverage. Now, if you're looking at an aspect where you have problems getting off press, like, where are you looking towards consistently? Are you trying to work guys into the slot because they're off the line and maybe have a two-way go? How much motion do you have to use? Are you using more trips and stacks and trying to, your hand is forced more if you're Joe Brady, because now you have to get a little more creative to help guys get off the line versus just having somebody where you're like, yeah, we can just split, Timmy out there and we know he's going to be able to win off the line, and then we'll go from there.
A crutch too, right? A guy that you can just, a gotta have it moment. You gotta have it player. And Diggs was that for many years. Now, did it drop off a little bit? Absolutely. There's no denying that. It was on the downslope last year, and there are many factors, as we said, but those gotta have it moments. Who's that guy now? Guys are gonna have to step up, and some of those guys aren't on the team right now.
No, and you need real quick, I'm going to grab the super chat from Cliff. Thank you very much for being here, Cliff. Thank you very much for the super chat and the comment. Cliff is talking about Brandon Beane's presser earlier today, and he says, Beane's remarks were with clenched teeth, in my opinion. He is seething that it went this way. If 14 stays, the 2024 wide receiver room would be a mess show. No choice but this. And I think that's fair. I don't think anyone in the Bills organization is happy that they traded Stephon Diggs from like a coaching or like management perspective. Like
Right.
and Bean said it as much when you pulled that quote earlier. Like they're not a better football team today than they were yesterday. They can potentially move forward and mitigate that loss of Stephon Diggs. But this isn't something I think that they had in mind completely,
Right.
when they signed him to an extension last year and gave him all that money. Like
Right.
with how that contract was baked in, the dead cap hit that they incurred this year for 2024, when you extend someone and sign someone to an extension and you prorate that signing bonus, you build in those cap hits. You do it in a way where you're only, first of all, you're only extending guys that you're going to keep for the
Right.
most part through that extension. But especially in those early cap hit years, like if Diggs went away in 2026 or 2027, cool, I would have understood it. There was not a thought in their mind when they signed him to this deal that he was going anywhere in 2024 because of how they loaded that contract. So yeah, he knows the financial,
Right.
kind of disaster that they had happen
That it
today, in
created, yeah.
addition to it creating another hole and
Mhm.
putting pressure on this group. And Eric, like we said, it leads us to that spot of now you're looking for that specific skill set and who becomes that new, for as much as there may have been off-field issues between Allen and Diggs. Diggs was still that security blanket. Diggs knew what to do when the play broke down and they ran the scramble drill. You knew Diggs was going to win on a third down,
Yeah.
even when there was predictability pieces in the offense under Dorsey and corners are playing him with specific leverage inside to take away the slant, he would still find a way to get inside and get open. Like
Mhm.
he was still that guy in a lot
And
of ways.
And even when he didn't get the ball, we've broken down in several
Gravity.
film rooms. He's
Yeah.
got that gravity. He opened things up. He kept the safety over the top so that guys could shine, so that Shakir could shine, Kincaid, Cook, and so many of those looks. Like we showed you guys that. So we understand the impact, the negative and positively, when it comes to Diggs and him being shipped out today, and financially for that matter. You're going to hear Greg and Aaron talk about it a ton in the show this tonight after us. But we understand the impact, but we also understand looking forward, what they need now in
Yes.
this draft. All right. And that's what this show is about. This draft, this show is going to be about wide receivers that are Bills targets who they could reach and get, obviously, to a certain extent, certain degree. And it's going to be part scouting show, obviously, but also like part off season when we're talking the personnel skills and their traits. And it's something I honestly, for many years, have fought against,
I
and that
know.
is saying
When
comps.
you messaged me about this idea, I was like, is this really Eric?
I
Like, are
know,
we
I
doing
know. I'm a
this?
sellout now. I know. I'm
But the way
sorry.
we're doing it, I think is very different than the traditional like comp aspect. And I
Sure.
think that's part of the reason why, this idea came to fruition. Cause yeah, you are not a comp guy.
I hate comps because I know if I hear a comp, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of boxed in. It's hard for me not to see that. So I know a lot of fans, especially fans that don't watch a lot of football, the average
Mhm.
Joe, as soon as they hear a name, it's like, okay, now they're locked in to a
Mhm.
certain, skill set. And so we're gonna approach it a little differently. We're gonna kind of stay away from that danger of boxing guys in. And we're gonna do it from, some of them they're gonna be stylistic comps. It could be as simple as, hey, their running gait. It could be
Mhm.
something about, how they get in and out of breaks. And let's see, we got another super chat here. Bills are electric. He says, crawling into Brandon Bean's brain. How is he going to attack a wide receiver in the first
Oof.
round? How high will he trade up? Giving away how many draft picks? You want to answer that real quick?
Man, it's interesting now to see what he does given the need at wide receiver, given the other needs that they have, also given that they got a 2025 second round pick, which that
Mhm.
return isn't great, but does that factor in? Does that increase the odds that he maybe trades next year's first? I still feel like I think a trade up would happen if someone falls into the 20s and they really want them. Like if Brian
Mhm.
Thomas is maybe sitting there at 22 or something like that, I think they go up. I don't think you necessarily see that move up to try and grab Odunze or Neighbors if he falls. Although I do think that idea that we talked about earlier today with the trade to the Bears, like I think that
Mhm.
does have some legs and could potentially work. But given the other needs on this roster, I really wonder how much he sacrifices all of that opportunity to kind of eh, fill out the roster completely and get some cost controlled quality and depth across the roster given, Josh Allen's contract and what they've incurred. Although I do think we'll see some moves. I don't think they completely sit with all 11 picks as now, But that's the question for me as far as how high he'll trade up. I think more into the 20s or the late teens, more likely than the big home run shot to trade up into the top 10 or top 12 or something like that for me.
Right. And I don't think trading Diggs is related to him automatically saying, I'm going to trade up. I think he's still going to let it come to him. He's going to see who falls, and that could be a different position. You talked about how's he going to attack wide receiver in first round. I don't think it necessarily means that it's going to be a wide receiver in the first round. I will say that. And I know that's going to piss off a lot of people, but
man, could you imagine now if they go like corner or like interior offensive line? It's going to be a madhouse.
So I do think that it's a possibility. And I had mentioned it in the show this afternoon and to Anthony a couple weeks ago, right before we went live. I was like, I think there's like a non-zero chance that Bean trades up, is aggressive like he normally is, and goes and gets a receiver. And for some reason, the guy that stuck out to me is Rome Odunze. Now, give me any of the top three. I don't care. You can convince me of either of them being future X's and stars in this league. And I think even Brian Thomas is to that point as well, where he may be, reachable when you're talking into those early 20s or whatnot, maybe even late teens. But I do think that, any of those players are going to be studs in this league, and some of those obviously sooner rather than later. So I don't set my expectations up that it's going to be hands down a wide receiver in the first round and that Bean is going to go trade up and get it. I think he's still going to let it come to him because the draft is so crazy every single year. These out of left field type moves happen. And so guys fall, and you just don't know what position gets pushed up, or pushed down, however you want to look at it, and is now in striking distance for Brandon Bean. It could be receiver, but it could be another position that, even like you said, corner or some position we're not really thinking about. Defensive tackle, maybe Murphy drops.
Yeah.
You never know.
And I mean, even thinking like, I'm just making this up in my head right now because I know how much you like him and I like him too. What if like 7 receivers go in the first 27 and Graham Barton falls to 28 and you're sitting there with Graham Barton? It's like, I kind of want to take Graham Barton. And I know Bean used a lot of coach speak today, but I do think the one area where he was telling the truth, and he said it, and I put it in that tweet that you showed earlier. He said, if we're sitting there at 28 and all of our first round graded receivers are gone, and the next receiver on the board is somebody that we have well into the second round, we're going to look at one of the other positions that we have graded higher than that. Like, they're not going to force their hand at receiver. And I think that's why if somebody does fall, like, I don't know, if somehow Odunze is still sitting there at 15 or 16, like maybe that increases the odds. But I think the more realistic option is, maybe they really like Brian Thomas or something, and he's still sitting there at 20 or the early 20s or mid 20s, and then maybe they want to pull the trigger and move up there. We know that, that he has a penchant for seeing a guy and wanting to go after him and going to get him, especially if it's like a moving up like 3 to 4 spots. And, I mentioned Brian Thomas, and it's a natural segue to the first person that we're going to lead off with this comp episode is Mr. Brian Thomas. Again, for all you folks, we are doing these comps from a large scouting perspective. Eric and I grind a ton of tape. You see a lot of it on Twitter if you follow us on Twitter. And then we're also watching more than we post, especially when you really get into the zone. Like, I know for me, like, I don't want to take the time to clip something. I'm just doing notes and breaking stuff down. So these comps are from a stylistic perspective, a skill set perspective, roles, traits, also some physical aspects too, right? Like, there's a guy who just looks like someone else, or like Eric said, it has the gait or the movement of someone else, that type of style. All of this comes from film study. All of this comes from all the hours and eye bleeding, grinding tape moments that we have. And the first one we have up is Brian Thomas, whose comp is Christian Watson, now of the Green Bay Packers, formerly of North Dakota State.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to watch these guys run when you look at their, again, stylistically, how they run, how they move. They're easy movers, big play, down the field threats. I like Brian Thomas. He keeps his head steady as he's tracking the ball down the field. His tracking is spectacular. It's why he had so many, of those big plays from the slot on those slot fades, his ability to track the ball down the field. Very good body control. As I talked about earlier, he is a former basketball player, and in high school, he scored over 1,000 points in each of his 3 seasons of basketball, named the most outstanding player of his team's state championship team. I do think he's a future X. He is plagued by some of those drops. He has periodic drops here and there, but man, if you're talking about easy speed, you're talking about a natural tracker of the ball, Brian Thomas is one of the top in the class. And it's something you talked about earlier as well. His gears
bro.
don't kick in until you're in that last quarter of the sprint, right? So if you're 40 yards downfield, he hits another gear to take off. And I would just love to see Josh Allen throw it to a guy like that.
Yeah, he's got this acceleration that is just, even if he's naturally running his route or in the stem, but especially like once he sees the ball, like if he's running a post and he sees the ball in the air, he's like, I don't know, it makes me think like when you're like playing fetch with a Labrador or one of those like hunting dogs. And when you throw that ball, boom, they are gone and they are out. And sitting there at basically 6'3", 209 pounds, running a 4.33 40, a 10-yard split of 1.5. It really is that acceleration paired with that size. Like you can't teach someone to be 6'3", 210 and run a 4.3 40. And you see him here at the bottom of the screen. Like it's just effortless the way he runs past
Glides,
his man.
right?
And then, like it's just, you shouldn't be able to move like that at 6'3", 210. And it's not clunky. He's also proportioned well. He's not overly leggy or like overly like torso built. He's proportioned well, and you see it in his movement. And when you put him side by side with Christian Watson, like we are here, it's really a spot on comp.
Yeah, watch the speed and gear that Watson hits to turn the corner against the Eagles there. Like, you're not catching him. Like, that stride and ability to glide down the field is just nice to watch, whether it's a vertical play or it's a play that's like that, like a 5-step slant, and you're seeing him take off. Here's another one, bottom of the screen against the Cowboys by many players. The players that can do it, one that Bills fans know of, Sammy Watkins. This was something that he was good at, but you got to have speed to do it. So normally you on these go balls, you tracking the
center fielder running down ball on the wide receiver or top 15 or top 10. A lot of that has been injury based. Like when he's been on the field, he has been very good for Green Bay. Like he has been a problem for teams because of that speed. And there you go. There's that best release now coming from Brian Thomas.
Separation.
That's what I was going to say, but even more separation. Granted, we're here at the college level instead of the NFL level by Watson, but just look how easy this is. And we talked about it a little earlier, being able to get off press. This is a press alignment from that corner, more of a soft shoe press instead of a true press, where instead of jamming Thomas at the line, he's more mirroring him on the snap. But you see that corner take that outside leverage. And so Thomas just puts his foot in the ground and runs right by him. And what's nice is he has the speed, but because of the size, again, it's 6'3", 210, he's also got a physical presence where he can run through arms and run through shoulders and maintain that gait because he's got the speed plus the size, which equals good momentum for him to be able to move through those corners. And those reps there, those are just due to his God-given talent and ability, which still can play a little bit at the NFL, which is what's exciting, because you take a player with that raw ability that you can't teach, and then it's like, okay, imagine what he'll be if we can coach him up more. Like he also does have, you don't see it a ton, but he is able to sink his hips on routes, on hitches and stuff when he's selling vertical. I do think he has lower body flexibility and flexion to his game to play with that long speed. I think he does have physical ability and traits that you can coach up that route tree, and you can add more to his stem work to make him more of a complete receiver. And the Bills have done that in the past. Granted, they've got some new, guys in the receiver room now, but that's what makes him so enticing as a prospect, is that natural, effortless speed plus size and physical tools that he works with. And then it's like, man, imagine if you coach him up and shine him up a little bit, what he can be going forward. And that creates a very, very high ceiling for him and puts him in that true X category.
Yeah, I think he can still add some mass and muscle to that frame. Obviously, he's still very young. And I do think he needs a attack ball on some stationary routes. So when he's running some of those stop routes, like, be QB friendly. We always talk about it. Come back to the ball. Don't just, stop and settle at the top of the route. And with that size and adding some more muscle, I'd like to see him just be a little more physical, because he has the finesse. Again, he's a former basketball player, so he's got that agility, that finesse. He uses that basketball background to avoid press, and you saw the best release technique. He's very agile. And there are obviously some areas that he needs to improve. But again, if we're talking end of the first round, in striking distance for the Bills, if not just sitting at 28 and he's there. In my first mock draft, I took him, at 28. So if he's within striking distance, I could see Brandon Beane really liking him and adding him, because again, and we're going to say it a few times in this breakdown, getting a guy that has the vertical stretch ability is just a plus this year, because the Bills need that role. They need that trait. Obviously, they want to develop a future X, a guy that can do and win at all three levels. I think Thomas does need to improve in some of those areas, in the short and intermediate areas, but the capabilities, whether you're talking physically or the skills or traits that flash,
Mhm.
I think he has that ability in the future. But early on, he can still win and stretch the field and have a really high, production rate or a major role in this offense with Josh Allen at quarterback. There's no denying that.
Yeah, he fills again that kind of power forward need for this basketball lineup at wide receiver. And because you have the presence of Dalton Kincaid and Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir and Dawson Knox, and then James Cook in the passing game, but also James Cook in the run game and Josh Allen overall, it allows him to potentially just slide in and, hey, rookie year, man, just be big, strong, and fast and provide this usage and provide this specific role that we need you to fill as you continue to learn some of the finer points and finer details of playing wide receiver at the professional level. And again, that's why that ceiling is so high for him and why it really fits for him to go to a team like the Bills where he may be, quote unquote, wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, but he doesn't have to necessarily be target 1 or option 1 where all that pressure is heaped upon him to be like, hey man, we drafted you in April. You need to clean up everything in your route tree before September because we need to give you 150 targets this year.
Right.
And it really pairs well with the Bills. Also, real quick, we got a super chat from J-Bo who loves your haircut, Eric. It says super
Thank
studly.
you.
So fair enough,
Appreciate it.
Fair enough.
High
Yeah,
and tight. That's the fade. The fade's everything, right?
the fade is everything. You know what's funny? Ironically, he's a really good slot fade runner, and that's a funny
True.
aspect. Way to tie that in. I'm sure that's why
true.
I brought up that comment to bring everything full circle. Let's stick with another one of those X types and someone that is a bit more polarizing for fans, depending on who you ask. I feel like you could ask 10 people about our next player, Mr. A.D. Mitchell, and you might get 5 people that love him and 5 people that absolutely hate him. I feel like there's no one in the middle for the most part. Obviously there is. I don't want to speak in absolutes, but most people are either very in on Mitchell or are very out. Very few are in the middle. There are some red flags, but he's next up on our list, and some of his comps are really fun here. We got 2 of them right there on the screen with Mike Williams from the Chargers, now with the New York Jets, and then Chris Godwin up there as well. Mitchell's a really intriguing one given, similar to Thomas, with the physical tools and traits that he has. But like we talked about, there are some red flags to his game to go along with those really, really strong positive flashes, and that's part of the reason why he's such a polarizing prospect.
Right, and he's a guy, I'll admit, I have a second-round grade on him. I know a lot of national analysts and draft Twitter have him, as a solid first rounder, some in their top 25 players. I'm not quite there. I think he's a thick, strong receiver. He's well proportioned, runs with really strong lean. So he's got a really strong lower body. I'd equate it to, like, if we're talking stylistically, to Shakir, how he kind of leans like a running back and can run through some of those
generates
arm
that kind of
tackles.
generates that like whip or that recoil in his lower body and springs.
And we've talked about it. He's explosive, but he's a different type of explosive. It's powerful. And I think that kind of plays into that. He positions his body really well to shield the ball. Will use physicality and length to separate. He's got that explosive power. He's reliable over the middle. And this is where I'm going with the Godwin comp, because I liked the Godwin comp because of how he's a possession type receiver over the middle. And it's something he did really well, at Texas. He had 1 drop last year. So he's got reliable hands. And when you tie it into the Bills offense last year and some of the reasoning behind not throwing over the middle all that often or with efficiency, I think adding a guy like Mitchell, much like a guy like Godwin, as you'll see on this play, he can help you obviously vertically with his speed, but I see a lot of those dig routes, those post routes, these routes over the middle, like Godwin's running here in the traffic, in sure-handed catch, with a hit coming here against the Chiefs. I see a lot of that in Mitchell over the middle.
Yeah, his success on end breakers, whether even just something as little as a slant, but those digs, those, posts, those overs, his ability to succeed in that area of the field, I think is something that really will translate well for him as a rookie, and specifically in this Bills offense, to go along with that smooth, fluid gait that he has and movement that he has. And some of the suddenness that you see A.D. Mitchell operate with really comes from more of that explosion and power aspect, like you said, which is great. But then at times he'll show, and this is a really nice grab too, like look at him reaching out, nice hands catch, the ability to get upfield a little bit before he gets brought down. Just, he's got soft hands, and he shows it in a variety of ways, like making catches like this above his head or ones that are outside his frame in front of him or behind him. or he's making basket catches downfield. He's got good ball tracking, soft hands. He's got a good catch radius, able to extend and reach outside of his frame vertically and horizontally. So throws above him and or behind him, like on that clip right there. I also think there's times, especially on his deep routes, he shows the ability to attack leverage of defensive backs. And all he needs is slight hesitation or slight deception, because once he puts that foot in the ground, it's power and explosion and burst coming out. Top of the screen. And again, this isn't the most amazing, out and up ever, the most amazing double move ever, but look at how smooth he is coming out of it, the pace. And then that's where it is, how athletic and smooth that over the head basket catch is. And he immediately transitions that into getting past the safety and generating some more yak. That's real pretty. Oof.
Yeah. And the thing with him, and probably why I'm not so high on him, if you watch the Georgia tape when he was at Georgia, like he showed this a little more consistently. But I feel like he runs like his routes. I mean, he kind of half-asses it. Let's be honest. He half-asses
100%. And there's even times where like not trying at all, but then he separates with that explosion, which won't fly at the NFL level, and that's part of the red flags.
Yeah, and it won't fly when you're talking about the Bills' offense, because even if you're on the backside of a play, with Josh Allen, he's going to extend the play, and you better be running full speed. Just because you're a clearing route and you're already 50 yards downfield, that doesn't mean your route's dead. And so, half-assing it, and I will say, the disclaimer on that is, I feel like that was part of their offense. It was like, you saw Worthy do it a little bit. Some offenses, when you're not the primary or secondary, you're not running 100% because you're an up-tempo offense. You want to save some of your energy for that play that actually goes to you. So some coaches, some staffs allow wide receivers to do that. Art Briles, Baylor back in the day, that's kind of the same type of thing with Steve Sarkisian at, Texas. So I will give him some of that leeway, but it happens too often for him, and they won't allow that to happen at the NFL level, especially if you're playing with Josh Allen. And I just feel like there were times where he played slower than his time speed, right?
Yes.
Slower than that 4.3 speed.
I was not expecting that 4.3 because of how he plays on tape. Even when he's really cooking, I didn't think he ran that, but especially just in general, I wasn't expecting it.
Right. And you literally have to study his film very closely, in my opinion, to find, some of the nuance of his game, because there is some, hidden in there, but I just don't think we saw it enough. So again, getting that type of consistency from him will be the coaching staff's job at the next level. And so these are just things you have to think about. But when it comes to these intermediate routes, he does a good job of creating two-way goes at the top of these routes, those dig routes like you see here at top of the screen, and coming over the middle. Like, this is where I think year one, he's going to be a force. And if you think about the Bills offense over the last few years and how Josh loved throwing that dag
hits, he's got the hands to maintain catches through contact and through the ground. And he's also a ball winner. Like, you'll see him extend and kind of dunk on dudes and play big at the catch point. I would like to see it more consistently from a physicality standpoint instead of just a pure finesse and skill piece. But he does have some of that in his game. And, I'm higher on him than you are. I remember you and I talking about him on the plane to Mobile, actually. But even within that, I still have a 2 on him as well. But again, and I feel like we say this all the time, not everybody taken in the first round has a first round grade. And so when you're getting there and sitting there at pick 28, it's like, oh, okay, like you took a guy with a second round grade. Oh my God, that's terrible. No, that's kind of just like naturally how it happens. And I think where he goes will be very important. I loved your comment, just to piggyback on it quickly, of, what's asked of you and what's tolerated. Like, even you and I, in prepping for this episode, we were talking about his blocking. Sometimes his blocking looks absolutely atrocious. Like, he could not care less and has no effort. And then there's that rep, like the one against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 game on that 4th and 1.
4th down,
where he completely murks the corner and drives him 10 yards downfield. And so I feel like a lot of it is he shows these flashes. If you can tap into him, and maybe it's just pure expectation, and maybe how he operates with that laziness or lack of effort at times is accepted or is coached or is allowed, whatever have you, wherever he goes, if they can tap into those flashes and getting that more consistently and generating that type of play out of him, man, you could have something really special on your hands. And that's an aspect of his game that, is really intriguing overall, and kind of puts him into that future type of X conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I do think he has the ability with his size, his speed, and again, he's one of the younger wide receivers in this draft class,
Good point.
so that he's still ascending. And again, once he gets coaching regularly, it's not just hey, run to open space. I do think he will improve. That's the college game, man.
Yep.
Like run to green, and I don't blame him. That's just the way things are at the college level. It's gonna be a little different. It's gonna be an adjustment, but again, I think there are some roles, some routes, some concepts that early on he could get broken in into that and the NFL game and the processing and speed of the game, but also he's got the physical measurables, the physical tools to win early, to have some of those splash plays that the Bills offense needs.
And I think even though they're different types of players, I put him a little bit in that Brian Thomas conversation because it's coaching him up just in a
Hmm.
different way. But those ceilings for each player in different ways are so high, but also both of them offer potential value for the Bills at their floor because, again, of their body type, skill set, frame, and everything they do kind of fitting into that potential X package in 2024, but especially and beyond. Like if you're looking at, man, we need someone to contribute this year, but then take over as that true number one, maybe in 2025, 2026, and down the road. And then also have that person under cost control with a 5th-year option because you got him in the first round. That's where that Brian Thomas comes in and that AD Mitchell potential as well. And that's why both of those guys are extremely enticing to a lot of Bills Mafia and a lot of Bills fans. Now, Eric, should we move on to our number 3 here?
Oh
Yes,
yeah.
let's do that. Let's do that. Mr. Lad McConkey, who I think is kind of a dark horse favorite for a lot of Bills fans, actually a lot of fan bases in general. I think once you watch the tape, just such a professional route runner, balled out a bit at the Senior Bowl as well. He's got some very strong reps against some very strong corners
Yes.
and good defensive players in this league playing in the SEC. He cooks some dudes with some regularity, and we have a familiar comp for Bills fans. Mr. Emmanuel Sanders is the
Yeah.
comp here for Lad McConkey from a route running play style standpoint, and one that I think is pretty spot on, and I know you do as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's fun because he's just that toolsy type of player when it comes to
Yeah.
technician. Like he's such a technician with setting up routes, with attacking leverage, using route pacing. Does a great job of freezing and causing doubt in the minds of
Mm,
cornerbacks and defensive backs. And what I really liked about his film, not just from last year, but when he was healthier in 2022, was his body language. You always hear Josh Allen talk about how important reading body language of wide receivers, how they look when they're coming in, in or out of breaks on certain routes, and how important that is to him when it comes to anticipating routes or why he isn't able to anticipate a route. I think he does a really good job of that. And you see that a lot in 2022 as opposed to 2023. And that body language is very important. I also noted that he quickly attacks the positional leverage of defensive backs, forcing them to open up most of the time to the wrong side. You see a lot of those vertical stems, those posts, those Dino posts that have multiple
mm,
breaks, and he gets guys just turned around. And a lot of the times it's like, dude, he's not even getting the ball, but he's turning these guys around. If he had a quarterback that could hit it down the field consistently, like a Josh Allen, then you're going to have bigger plays and maybe more talk about him among that top one or top two tier when it comes
mm.
to wide receivers. But his quickness in and out of releases and acceleration in and out of breaks is just it's filthy to watch. And he really creates separation. And I know a lot of people are talking about, hey, he struggles versus press. Yeah, naturally he's going to with his size, right, Ant?
Yeah, absolutely. And just as an aside too, like for those folks watching, like Eric and I don't really share our notes on stuff until we get to the show. And I
Yeah,
really
true.
love when there's times when what you have just matches. Like I don't really have anything to add for Lad because everything you said is basically what I have in my notes. But yeah, that's that frame aspect that you're going to have for him. Like he's a true professional route runner. I think he
Oh
hits
yeah.
the ground running right now, being able to almost run every route in the tree and having that, like you said, that deception, that ability to attack leverage, that ability to win in the stem or separate on the break. He has really great feet. And for me, it's all about that body language and that deception. Like you don't know what he's going to do until he does it. But when you look at him, 5'11 and 5'8, 186 pounds, a 72-inch wingspan, which is the ninth percentile. He's
Yeah.
17th percentile for weight. Arm length is 30 and a quarter, which is 10th percentile. Hand size, for those that matters to, 8 and 5/8, which is the 6th percentile. I think that's where some of the ceiling conversation comes in for him because of that size, because of that frame, contested catchability, ball winner,
Mm.
down the field potential. But Eric, as the tape here shows, you just watch him win in a variety of ways. And it's just, oh, filthy. That double move
Yeah.
there. Again, it's the feet, it's the deception, the eyes, the body language, all of it. I knew he was real when I was watching a clip of him against Tennessee, and he's running a 9, a vertical for those who don't know what a 9 is, and he freezes the DB, he freezes the corner with a rocker step and a 9, and I was like, I've never seen that as a way to, like, freeze a dude on just a pure go route, and when you add it with what we've seen at the Senior Bowl and a lot of these double moves and the deception that we're showing here, just look at the corners operating. Like, they don't know whether to plant, whether to sit, whether to continue their drop. Like, he just has you in hell.
Yeah, and I put these plays back to back for a reason. Off corner here, you see the double move, and he blows right by that guy. And so then later in the game, what does he do? He's a technician. He's savvy. He knows his craft. He makes it look like he's doing that double move again. And that's why that corner is like, he has no idea what's
Yep.
coming. And his eyes go to the quarterback, not even the man anymore. So is he going to run by me? No, he doesn't. He puts the brakes on, and it comes across the middle, hits that little window over the middle, right at the sticks, and he's able to, catch the ball there and get the first down. Like, he's a technician. He finds space. He creates separation. Here's a play from the Bills with Sanders to the top of the screen, and right here, he wants to sit right here in this area, in this zone between these two defenders right here. But as Josh's eyes get to him, there's no way that he's going to get the ball there. So what's he do? He runs to green, right? Sanders runs to green. He creates separation. He uncovers. That is what McConkey can do. Look at him, top of the screen here. He's a boundary receiver. Watch him work against this quarters coverage look. He comes across the middle like you saw Sanders do, and he's sitting right there, but he sees that this guy's going to drive hard on that route. So what's he do? He runs to green. He uncovers. He runs by that guy, and he gets open, and he's able to get the first down, but also, make an explosive out of this with some of that speed post catch.
Yeah, the speed is one that when you watch the tape, he's got juice to his game. I was not expecting him to run a 4.39 40 at the
100%.
combine.
I'm with you on that.
Right? And even with Ricky Pearsall running a 4.41, I wasn't expecting that
That's an
either.
eye-opener too.
Huge boons in the testing for both those guys. But there's real juice to McConkey's game after the catch and in his routes and in his stems. And this clip really pairs well with that previous Emmanuel Sanders one. And man, I really wish Emmanuel Sanders didn't get banged up in that year with Buffalo, because he was doing so good. Like, even from just a fantasy football perspective, he was crushing it, let alone what he meant schematically.
He's a great fit with Allen and the way that Allen plays the game.
So great, like, just technically, and that veteran experience and what he could do and what he knew how to do. And McConkey's feel for space and feel for leverage in zone. Again, he's really just so polished technically and from a football IQ standpoint already coming into the league. He arguably, I mean, aside from the big three, he's arguably got, like, I feel like that could have the highest floor of any receiver in this class, just because he's already such a professional route runner. That ceiling might be capped a little bit as a true one, but you watch him, he can win underneath, he can win in the intermediate, he can win vertically. And it's a shame, like you said, a lot of times he wins vertically and just doesn't get the ball, which is unfortunate. But he really can win at all three levels and succeed inside and outside. He is going to struggle with some of the physicality, I think, at the NFL level, some physicality and length concerns. But he does have a good release package, and he's somebody that I trust with the technical prowess that he has to be able to figure out a way to kind of piecemeal it together if he needs to, because he just has such a wide array of ability and how he can win and where he can win on the field. It's really impressive to watch him work.
Right. And honestly, prior to the Diggs trade, if the Bills didn't make the trade of Diggs, I would like to have a McConkey, probably not at 28. I have a second round grade on him, but
Same.
I think we talked about luxury. I think he would be a great player to have and to groom, to play multiple positions and roles in the Bills offense, because he's a separator. He's obviously got some speed that I think is going to catch some people off guard, even at the next level. And he just runs great routes and he thinks next level. We talked about what the Bills are losing in Diggs and how it's going to be the experience and film study and all that. But it is also going to be like, okay, how do you set up this route to make it look like the next route that you're building off of? So those type of things, like McConkey's floor is already high enough to be a very good player at the next level. I think where he goes and what system he goes to is going to be very important. He's going to have to go to a team, especially if they use him early, that plays a lot of those, those tighter splits, those nasty splits that maybe he's a boundary guy. He's the outermost wide receiver, but they tighten his split with a tight end on the line of scrimmage so he can't get pressed and get leaned on and get jammed at the line of scrimmage. I think those type of things that, we talked about with Joe Brady and bringing Curtis Samuel, I think some of those things apply to McConkey. And if Diggs wasn't traded, I do think that McConkey would be a great person to have come in and learn behind Diggs and the receivers in the Bills room. But I just don't know if the Bills sink a draft pick into him now, even though he went on Kay Adams' show today and was like, yeah, I met with them multiple times. I'm sure he's going to be a hot commodity. And I think that commodity is going to start in day 2.
Well, even just, he definitely met with the Bills at the Senior Bowl because the teams meet with every player, and then probably met with them again at the combine. And he's an impressive dude. Like when you watch him on the tape, and I am in a similar boat with him. Like I like him, and I would have been very fine with him pre-Diggs trade. Now I just think that pendulum has swung more towards that traditional X type of need and upside with that position. And it's funny as soon as you were saying like the type of team he was going to go to before you even said tighter splits, the first thought that came into my head was, man, imagine if he went to the Rams with what they do there and him and Puka and Cooper Kupp and what they do with their bunches and their tight stuff and just how much of a precision offense.
The McVays, like that tree, which they're everywhere now.
I was going to say, which is like 70% of teams.
Yeah, like 2/3 of the offenses in the league, were the get back guys for Shanahan or McVay. So I mean, I guess he's got a good chance to go early in this draft and be productive year 1.
Because that tree is freaking everywhere. That's very funny. That's good. Yeah, dude has some real ability. And it's fun. And I think he's now gotten to a bit of a hyperbolic situation where I think some people knock him too much and kind of downplay what he can do. And I think other people kind of overplay their hand with him in terms of making him out to be like, I started making the Chuck Norris jokes for Lad McConkey, like, like Superman wears Lad McConkey pajamas and stuff like that. Just because everybody loves him so much, but he really is a quality player with a very high floor coming in as a rookie. And then where he goes could be really, really, really interesting. Next man up on our list, somebody who I was very excited to go into and watch the Senior Bowl, at the Senior Bowl. He was one of my guys to watch. I was very excited when you came away from the Senior Bowl being as big of a fan of his as I was. And he's somebody that, you did a really nice breakdown on him earlier this week. Folks can check that out on the Cover One YouTube channel. Mr. Javon Baker, wide receiver from UCF, was at Alabama before that. He is another drop in that potential X wide receiver bucket. Yes. He's somebody that we've talked about for a long time of being like, you don't need to go wide pre-Diggs. It was, you don't need to go wide receiver in round 1. Just get Javon Baker at 60. Or before that, it was like, oh, you could get him with a 3rd round pick, but he's crept up a little bit. Looks like he's solidly potentially in that, definitely in that day 2, but in round 2 potentially. And it really is because of the tools that he has, the traits, the skill set aspect, his play style, and again, how he falls into that true X potential bucket, similar to Brian Thomas and A.D. Mitchell, like we've already spoken about.
Yeah, and I do think the comp, Courtland Sutton, I think that's almost like, I'd say that's more of a floor. I think if Javon Baker realizes his potential, I think he could be better than Sutton.
He was at Alabama for a reason, man. And I know guys transfer out and do different stuff. Like, you don't get to Alabama by accident.
Yeah, and another guy that kind of came to mind was Dontavian Wicks with the Packers. Just stylistically, the releases and kind of crossover type stuff you're going to see in some of this film. But I like Baker because, one, his mentality. He's a dog. He's that fiery competitor. You always talk about that Oklahoma game. Why don't you fill the guys in on that Oklahoma game? He's got that mentality, man. That's what you want, especially if you're talking receiver. It's not many receivers hold that type of mentality.
No, and so what happens in the Oklahoma game, like it actually was a back and forth game, and UCF almost pulled off the win against Oklahoma, but UCF is making a comeback, and Oklahoma blows coverage, and he catches like a 70-yard touchdown, but he catches it on the Oklahoma sideline, and as he runs up their sideline, blows a kiss to the Oklahoma sideline as he houses it, and it's just that mentality he plays with. Like, he's a dog. He's got that fight. He's got that bite and that type of urgency and nastiness overall in his game and that attitude and mentality. And what did he tell you at the Senior Bowl with like DB's like, oh, I'm just going to kill him?
Yeah, I'm trying to get all like schematic with him, try to get into his head about, how he would approach a guy pressing him versus off coverage and approach the release. He's like, basically said, my mentality is to go out there and kill the DB. I'm like,
yeah, great.
What's your follow-up to that?
What's your follow-up? after I asked him, I
Yeah.
was like, hey, you have a really good release package in your stem work. Like, what do you try to do out there? And his answer was like, I already know what the DB's fin to do. So I just go out, beat him, and that's it. And I was like, okay. And just that type of confidence and attitude is just like, it's just awesome.
Yeah, he's a guy that I like because he uses, let me get to some of these clips. He uses, all the tools in his toolbox. You can see him climb the ladder here, but he actually shows some really nice nuance when it comes to
Yes.
route running. He uses his eyes, he uses his shoulders, he sells all of his routes. He's a good salesman. He's got a better release package than I think what we see from Sutton, who's kind of a bigger bodied guy,
Mhm.
more of a jump ball type guy. I think he's got a better release package. He's a little more flexible and loose in
Yes.
the release package, but he uses active hands down the field. As I get to some of these clips, he does a great job in these like 50-50 balls of, keeping his frame clean. But if the guy's, chest to chest with him and playing it really well, you see right there, there's like a little push off at the end, a subtle push off you'll see from the
Mhm.
end zone angle where he's able to, go up and get the ball there. And you'll see it better from the end zone angle. But he uses his hands really well at the line of scrimmage. And, if we're talking about at the catch point, as I let this roll here, he's very good at it. And one of the reps that I showed in the video that I did this week on Baker was his
Mm.
ability at the line of scrimmage versus press. And Quinyon Mitchell
Yes.
was trying to jam him, and he just threw him aside. Like, he's got active hands, 32-inch arms. You see how he creates that separation at the catch point there. But there's this nuance, Anthony, that I think is really going unnoticed and is a little underrated. Watch how he sets up this guy.
Mm.
He's one-on-one with him, sets him up outside, inside. That guy turns around totally out of phase, thinking that Baker's going to push vertically up the hashes, and then he snaps the route off at the top, throws that guy by. And I want to slow it down just a little bit to show you. All he did was do this. He ran an out route, but
Yep.
look at the nuance and the
Yeah.
spice that he added to this. It's just filthy, and I think that goes unnoticed a lot for these young wide receivers. But he's got it built in. He's just not rated as high as a lot of the wide receivers in this draft.
The timing of this clip is tremendous because we had a comment in the chat that said, no, thank you. He gets zero separation. And then here on this one, he's just turning that apex defender inside out with, again, all he's running is an out route, but he stems it inside to turn the man, sells vertical and sells upfield, which causes that apex defender to get on his horse and be like, uh-oh, he went inside. Let me get on my horse. And then whoop, just gears it down. And also like the way he cuts and just finds that space. And he's just such a fun watch. I think he has arguably, again, and this is in a class where you have a generational talent in Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Baker's in there for arguably the best release package in this class. Like, he has multiple moves off the line. Like you said, he can win with suddenness. He can win with explosion or power. He can win with his hands and physicality. I like the physicality in the stem as well. I forget who it's against this past year, but he's getting grabbed in his stem and he literally just like forearm shivers the corner to the ground to get him off of him. Like, he plays with that nastiness and that physicality, and you routinely see the athleticism and physicality show up in his stem work. Look at the after the catchability here, like to sense that corner on his backside, gets low, puts his feet in the ground, pivots, U-turn, spins, and get upfield. And then look at him making everybody work to try and bring him down with that stiff arm to the safety. Like, everything he does is nasty, it's mean, it's power, and it all ties into that frame and that skill set and everything that he has in there. And also that level of sync that he has in his hips and his lower body there. Again, for a dude that's 6'1", 202 pounds, he's built well, he's put together well, and that allows him to have some of that flexibility in his game. And it's part of the reason why he's able to win in multiple ways at multiple levels.
Yeah, and someone in the chat, Roy, is saying, didn't Baker run a 40-yard dash over 4.5? Yeah, I think it was like a 4.54.
Correct.
But speed doesn't necessarily mean you separate. Lack of speed doesn't necessarily mean that you can't separate. So we're showing you the nuance to his route running. There are many ways to win, at the college and NFL level. This had nothing to do with speed. This all had to do with technique and ability to attack leverage and to make a defender think that he's running this route versus that route. And he did a great job of assaulting that leverage. Like, there are many ways to win when we're talking, route running and technique at the next level. And I like this comp because of that ability to, go up and climb the ladder if you have to. Here's Sutton in the bottom of the screen, that double move. And then again, going up and getting it, flying and floating in the air, one-handed catch there in the end zone. You look at it from the end zone angle. I really like this comp. I do think Baker is a little more flexible. Baker does have issues at times with drops. He's going to have some drops here and there. And most of them are mechanical framing issues. Some of them just lack of concentration. He had one game where he had an interception happen because it bounced right off his hands, but he can do this type of stuff that you see Sutton do, where he climbs a ladder and uses that length or uses that frame to, lock in separation or just to create separation as the ball drops in.
Yeah, and again, that ability to play big at the catch point, like he's got the ability to dunk on dudes there, or he can separate with a hand, separate with an arm. And this is a legitimate aspect of Courtland Sutton's game that I love. That type of ball winner with that body and frame and size. And you see Baker pull it off on tape again. Like he can win at the line with his release. He can win in his stem. He can win on the break, or he can win at the catch point by playing big and dunking on someone, or love that there again, coming back to one of these first clips, like that ability to subtly use his hand or use his arm and separate a little bit and create a little bit of space without drawing that OPI. He does that routinely, using that hand, using that arm. And again, it's an aspect that allows him to be able to play in that potential X role because of the size, the frame, the skill set. Here's another example of, again, separating at that catch point. He keeps that corner at bay by using that arm. He's not pushing. He's just separating, keeping space, and then again, goes up. And each time you see him win at the catch point like this, you see him using his hands. He's going up and he's getting the football. He is high pointing it to a degree, attacking it, making it his. There's another example, too, of playing physical through the stem. Corner gets on him. He shrugs him off, sees what's developing with his corner or with his quarterback right now, puts his feet in the ground, pivots back outside, goes and gets it.
I think that's important. Think that's important for Josh Allen and the Bills offense, being able to knowing when to and recognizing the scramble drill. Like that's incredibly important. That's something that shows up on his film. Here's the late hands again. We'll see better from the end zone angle, but here's that takeoff route and ability to separate late, throw that guy by and track the ball down the field. Like this is an element of the offense that the Bills don't have. And especially, with Diggs out and Gabe gone, these are the type of things that this offense really hasn't seen, especially if we're talking like the ability to play above the rim, throw a guy by, play with some physicality. And he does it all good, especially late in the play like this at the catch point.
Yeah. And again, it's an aspect that Josh Allen really hasn't had. He hasn't had that kind of bigger bodied ball winner who can win at the catch point like that. A lot of these guys have just been pure separators in a variety of ways. Here he is getting vertical up the seam there. The hands again, the ability to finish. Like, I really think he can win over the middle. He can win outside, again, win at the line, underneath, intermediate. What he can run and what he can do fits already right now.
His concentration, up and over a defender, tight coverage. And he separates at, come on now.
And he's also a good blocker too. Like he's feisty in the run game as a blocker. Again, everything he does is dog mentality. Like we saw it at the Senior Bowl. We saw it on tape in a multitude of games. Like I can't even count how many games like I've watched. I know you watched a ton as well with him. Like he just does so many pretty things. And one piece I wanted to show as well is this clip from the Senior Bowl. It just, as soon as, you showed that Courtland Sutton, I'm just thinking of one-on-ones here, and watch Baker work, just go up, get it, toe tap. Like
is that separation? That's separation, right?
I think maybe
there are many ways to separate. Some with speed, some with route running, but when you're talking at the catch point, this is separation. Being able to play above the rim and use your length to, extend the catch radius and to help the quarterback, that's separation, guys.
Yep. And I love that you made that point because it's something we talked about with Drake London, because people are like, oh, he doesn't separate. He separates at the catch point. There's multiple spots you can separate. Again, like that's why we're talking about Baker, because he can separate in a multitude of ways, but you can separate at the catch point. You can separate in the stem or at the release or just purely on the break. Yes. And this one, as soon as you pulled up that first one of Sutton, I thought of this one just because of how similar it was to the area of the field and the type of catch where he goes up, gets it, almost mosses that corner a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. And then look at the athleticism to turn in midair. He gets both feet down. Man, that's,
I look at body control right there.
Right. It's just, man, there's a reason that, we've gravitated towards him for so long, just given, again, size, the skill set, all that type of stuff and how he fits into this offense. Now let's shift to less of an X receiver conversation, but another very, very, very fun option. Whew. Mr. Xavier Worthy, the current combine record holder, running a 4.21, especially after he ran first, like a 4.25? or a 4.26 or something like that, and then
Yeah.
decided to come back because he wanted to break the record
Competitive
and
dude,
then
yeah.
did. Yeah. Dude is just a gamer. That competitive piece is something I really like about him as well. Like, even though he's a smaller frame guy, he puts his shoulder and head down after catches and will try and run through somebody, even though he is a smaller dude. And I think the comps for him are spot on. Somebody who I loved last year and who I know you
Yeah.
liked as well, Tank Dell, who went to the Houston Texans, and then Desean Jackson, which I think is a really spot on comp as well. And I know you like, and I think both of those dudes really fall well into that Xavier worthy comp from a play style standpoint, size and frame standpoint, and what
Yep.
you have to work with.
Yeah, speed, quickness. I think Worthy, even for his size, is tough and he absorbs big
Yep.
hits. He's competitive. He's willing to throw a block to spring a running back. He'll do whatever it takes. Now, some of the routes are a little lackadaisical. We did talk about that. But I think, in an offense, even though he's a little smaller, I think, Texas did a great job of utilizing motion and to get him to top speed, kind of like what the Dolphins do with Hill, with a kind of motion, him getting damn near to full speed and then hiking the ball, and he's just blowing by guys. But the thing that really stood out the most to me is his body control and tracking. It's elite, man. The way he can run full speed, that 4.2 speed, but track up over his shoulder and track the ball while running full speed is special. It is very much like Desean Jackson, how he just floats, but he's able to also keep his head steady, keep his eyes steady as the ball's dropping in. Like that type of tracking and body control is unreal. It's special. Not many guys have it.
No, and it shows up on that moon ball from Quinn Ewers against Alabama. Just what he can do downfield from a ball tracking perspective, like his outside shoulder, the end zone angle, I'll say, is the beautiful. Watch him contort his body, find this ball, and then the catch. The body
He's running
control,
full speed with his head all the way back. It's crazy.
bro, that's so hard. Like, and the body control, the athleticism, the hand-eye coordination, in addition to the speed. There's so many things to like about this rep, and I think this one really encapsulates like who he is, just with that speed, the body control, the downfield ability, the ball tracking. I also think he's a better route runner than he gets credit for. Like, he understands how to accelerate and decelerate in and out of breaks, how to create deception.
There's
He
some
runs
route pacing here, some of that deception
yes.
you're talking about. Look how he changes speeds, kind of like McConkey earlier. Like you see some of that route pacing and changing of the speed so that it gives the illusion that a break's coming or it's not coming.
Yes. And then he'll pair that with also running routes at 100% out of the gate. And you're thinking, uh-oh, he's going vertical. And he slams on the brakes and runs it out or runs you off on a hitch. And, oh, this is a really nice one, too, against TCU. Just
look at
again,
that separation
yes,
late.
the acceleration. Look, similar to what we talked about with Brian Thomas, what we talked about with Jermaine Burton earlier today. He's got that speed where see ball, get ball. Like, he sees it in the air, he goes and he gets it. You know he can win vertically because of the speed and the ball tracking and the hands downfield. But there's so much to like with him. And, for a Bills team that has needed some of those separators and those guys that can beat man coverage, either with route running or speed, he's a guy that can do both of those things. And the Tank Dell comp is just spot on, not just because they're both smaller dudes, but it's the speed and precision with which they work.
And just pay attention to how the Texans used them. Like sometimes in the slot, sometimes the manufactured stuff, sometimes versus man, sometimes versus zone. You see the big tough catch there in traffic. Worthy's the same way. He's willing to go up and get the ball and take that big hit, as we saw numerous times on film from him. So I feel like Tank Dell, as of late, recently, oh, that was a sick route.
That's so nasty. I love that one.
Sick route. He walked so that Xavier Worthy could run fast. And so I think that this bodes well. The season that Tank Dell had, the comp of Desean Jackson, I think it bodes well for Worthy, getting taken early in this draft. And I have a second round grade on him, but he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if a team bets on him in the late first round or somewhere in the, bottom half of the first round because of that game-breaking speed and ability to track the ball. This is what the game is about. Getting explosives, regardless of your size. And you can see that Tank Dell can do it. If he can do it, Worthy can.
And I've been a huge proponent of Worthy all offseason, and part of the reason is because of the success of Tank Dell last year. And we talked about in the Senior Bowl last year after Tank Dell blew it up on day one. He was an outlier for outliers. Like, everything about Tank Dell was an outlier. And that was a lot of last year's class. Even Jordan Addison, as a wide receiver 1 in that class, was an outlier with his size and frame.
Yeah.
Even Josh Downs, even though we loved him as a slot guy, still very much an outlier for his size. And you saw Addison have success, Downs have success, and Tank Dell have a ton of success. And I also want to get out in front of the Tank Dell. Someone be like, yeah, but Tank Dell got hurt. Tank Dell got hurt blocking on a duo run in the low red zone,
in the low
where
red zone.
anybody would have broken their leg on something like that. Like, that wasn't because Tank Dell is an outlier in terms of size. That's like saying that Matt Milano is injury prone because his leg got caught in one way and his leg broke. Like, anybody's leg is going to snap in that type of instance, which is very unfortunate. But yeah, I think the speed and tracking for Desean Jackson is spot on for Xavier Worthy, but I really like the speed paired with the route running nuance of Tank Dell. That's a really fun comp as well. And I don't think Dell got talked about enough in that way last year. It was like, little guy, go fast. And it was like, no, watch him route up like anybody he comes up against. And I think Worthy can do that as well. And you take him with that speed and all that route running potential. I do think I liked him more potentially for the Bills pre-Diggs. Now post-Diggs, it's like, I see him more of as a slot and a Z, and I do prefer that X like we talked about, but someone's going to get a really fun guy to kind of play with his route running and his toughness and speed. It's a really fun combination. And another receiver. Oh,
yeah, no, real quick, just some of the negatives just before we move on. I think obviously the size. You have to mention the size.
Absolutely.
I think that he struggles when guys are up on him and into him. He struggles to clear his frame. I think that's going to be obviously a major issue if you have a smaller type wide receiver. I didn't like some of the body language in showing up of his quarterback. You know, his quarterbacks missed him a bunch, and he missed those wide receivers.
Mitchell too. Quinn Ewers left some meat on the bone last year for Texas.
Yes, exactly. And so I thought I didn't like their body language and the way they treat him. You can't do that to your quarterback. All right. I'm sorry. That's just a quick way, especially if we're talking Josh Allen, to not get the ball. I think that's what'll happen. And so I do think, again, the hands, the press, you're going to see some of that, kind of come back to bite him a little bit. But I think overall, ball security too. He had 4 fumbles, and they do some different things with him. Not just the passing game, some screens, some end arounds and type stuff. Ball security is a minor critique, but something that you do have to worry about at the next level with his size. So, just a few things I wanted to mention before we move on with him. Solid day 2 grade on him, though, right? Solid early day 2 grade, and I don't think he's a future X when it comes to that conversation, but. This next guy, I do believe, has the ability to possibly do that. Maybe year 2, year 3, if we're talking that future X receiver.
Yes. And real quick, I completely agree with that assessment of Worthy at the end. And I also want to know, so at the combine, he weighed in at 165. And I think that was very much to try and break the 40 record. I think he plays more in the mid 170s. And then he's probably running like a 4.28, which is still extremely fast. So I just wanted to put that out there. Like, I don't think his playing weight is 165.
That's fair. He guys cut to run fast, especially at that position.
Absolutely. Yeah. We see that kind of combine gamesmanship all of the time. Let's stay with the Xavier category here, but move on to Xavier Legette, somebody who's really caught some more steam lately. And the AJ Brown comp, he really is just a baby AJ Brown, in a lot of ways. And he's somebody who, again, when you talk about like seeing someone in person, just an impressive dude. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he looks like a T1000. Like, dude is just
developed in the lab, 100%.
Yeah, he's big, he's cut, and 6'1", 221 pounds, runs that 4.3 40. And dude just absolutely moves in a lot of ways that should not be possible according to the laws of physics, similar to AJ Brown a little bit. And man, when you talk about the upside, Xavier Legette is somebody in that conversation where if he hits on the upside, given the raw tools and traits that he has, this is look out NFL, because just what do you do with a guy like this?
Yeah, I mean, he's impressive, as you said, top to bottom, film, in person, separator, explosive, visibly has juice on film, and even in person when he was banged up at the Senior Bowl, he was still smoking guys. And we're not just talking straight line speed. He had some really nice, nuance to some of his routes. Something that I was like, oh, he's got that. That's interesting to see, because it's all you heard that he couldn't do. But you just need to see it on a more consistent basis. Obviously, with his size, he's powerful. and he has that yak ability. And I think that's why he's such a great fit for the Bills. I think he would be a great fit for the Bills offense if we're talking whether when Diggs was here and now that he's not here. I do think he has enough skills to again be a big role player early on. Very good body language on routes underneath. We talked about that with McConkey and how important that is to Josh Allen. Shows the break to the quarterback, kind of changes his body language, saying, hey, this shoulder's further away, throw it to this shoulder so I can turn upfield to help with the yards after the catch, that type of stuff. And then that transition from, being a receiver, catching it, and now becoming a runner, that running back, there's no hitch in that game. That transition is there, immediate. And I'm talking, it's right to third gear, and he just takes off. Route running, it shows promise at times, as we saw down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, but an area that he can obviously improve on.
Yeah, he needs to polish in route running and the stem work and just how to consistently win from a technical aspect. But again, similar to kind of what we spoke about a little bit with, Brian Thomas here, like you're betting on the physical tools and the traits. And one of my favorite aspects of his game is just how he can win downfield and how it's not just because of like, pure speed and he's just running past dudes. Like he has the ability to just hang in midair. And this catch is a great example. He has this one. There's one against Georgia. Like he just floats midair. Also, real quick, shout out to Spencer Rattler throwing this about 50 yards downfield off his back foot with a defensive tackle bearing down on him. Like this throw is ridiculous. But watch this end zone angle for Xavier Legette and watch him just find this ball and sky for it. Just hang time.
Yeah.
As he gets beautiful into the air. And again, for a dude 6'1", 220 plus, to have that ability to separate at the catch point and go up and get it. Like that ability, again, to dunk on dudes, to high point the football, to play big man football downfield and turn 50-50 balls into 80-20. It's just another aspect of this game that gets you super excited. And again, puts him into that A.J. Brown comp and that type of skill set style.
Yeah, you saw that contested catch, the ability to play above the rim. Here's basically bracket coverage on Brown to the bottom of the screen, and watch him just go up and get it with his hands right there. Use his body to throw that guy by. He goes up against two defenders and, basically mosses them for a touchdown. And you're going to see that here, this time from the slot with Xavier Legette right here against Georgia, across the face of the defensive back. And then again, just going up and getting the ball. Here it is from the end zone angle, and the quarterback once again extending the play. And then there's the high point right there.
This one's so stupid. This one's
like
so
a glitch
dumb.
in the Matrix, bro. It's literally like a glitch in the Matrix, just floating up there and catching that ball down the field.
That's literally what I said. I retweeted this maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and Greg commented, and I forgot what he asked, but I said, yeah, like it's a glitch in the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, this is,
it looks unnatural. It doesn't look real.
100%. And then even when he goes up there, look how he still goes up and snatches the ball out of the air. Like he's still using his hands to like pluck it from the sky. And just, man, like this was one that when I put this clip out, I rewound it like 3 times so people could truly just so stupid. And again, he's doing that against Georgia, like who are filled with talent at every single level on the field. So watching him stand out because of his athleticism and size and speed against the defense of that caliber is another feather in his cap. And again, this is an aspect of, man, like see ball, get ball because you're extremely fast, but also Josh Allen can throw it up and hang it up there. And you know that he can go up and get it and has the physicality to beat dudes with it.
Yeah, and with that size and strength and speed, I do think that, there are moments where he's physical at the line of scrimmage. You see A.J. Brown right there. You see how he opens up the gate of that defensive back at the line of scrimmage. That's the type of size and strength that I do believe Xavier Legette does possess. And you see the run after catch ability with Brown too. I think that was, kind of sneaky trait and skill that he had coming out. Here's, Legette, again, you talked about it earlier, this Georgia clip. At the line of scrimmage, watch the release here. Releases inside, throws that defender by as he man turns to Legette, and then gets outside, but then snaps a rod off after going vertical. And he's not done there. Now it's time to float. It's time to go up and get the ball. And he does it there. Again, check the level of competition that he was playing against. This dude, although he was a one-year type wonder after 5 years of playing at South Carolina, he can do these things against this type of competition. It's the consistency, being able to do that consistently that we need to see from him. But I do think he has the ability. We see flashes of winning at all levels and winning above the rim with his route running. It's all there, but getting it out of him consistently is the key.
And I think the Senior Bowl really, I think, went a long way for myself and, potentially you too as well. I don't want to speak for you, but, watching him be able to work in a more professional manner and having to win in different ways at the Senior Bowl. And like you said, like him pulling off some routes where we were like, oh,
Mhm.
look at that. And then to go along with clips like you see here, like look at him sky and get that football, and also the hand-eye coordination and the concentration, because the DB undercuts it,
Yep.
almost gets his hand on it, and just, man, like, it's just that's hard to do against anybody, let alone Georgia, like, let alone with regularity. Like, you see him pull these clips off and these plays against high level of competition, and that's what, to your point, Eric, what you're trying to tap into consistently, so you can take him from being, an Xavier Legette and turning him into an AJ Brown, who, again, ironically, some of this conversation was also being had with AJ Brown coming out of Ole Miss, him
100%.
and Metcalf too, to a degree, where it was
Yes.
like, these guys look tremendous, but they don't have a lot of production. How polished are they? How polished can they be? And
Brown, his story too was not just his size, but he was primarily a slot. So he's like, can he be an X? Can he be a boundary receiver?
yeah,
Xavier Legette, he was on the boundary 65% of the time last year, but they did move him around, as you saw. He was also in the slot. But it's these type of things like, can he be a boundary receiver? You see AJ Brown here, Anthony, get into the blind spot of that defensive back.
yep.
Like you see that because of the speed of Legette, you see him get into that blind spot. That corner gets turned around, loses Legette, and you see him snap that route off. And when he snaps it off, you see him, he comes to a halt. He comes to
Yes.
a halt. There's no wasted steps. He's able to separate at the top of that route. He has a ton of separation because of it. You got to respect his speed deep. You can easily get into the blind spot of the defender, especially if they're playing this type of zone coverage, cover 3 type look. Get into the blind spot while that corner's in bail. Like, it's going to be there, and it's there for the Bills offense a ton.
Yes, absolutely. Like, and seeing him win on this type of route and create that separation and run that corner off is exciting, because it doesn't take him like 7 steps to be able to get out of his break, because that athleticism and that size, I think, is also paired with a pretty good flexibility, especially in his lower body. Like, he's yoked up, but he's not stiff. He's not rigid in his movement. Like, you see that fluidity in his lower body. Again, he just needs to be taught how to consistently win in that manner, or even just potentially he might just need more reps, which has been part of the issue even at South Carolina. And again, like watching AJ Brown do this, like this really is a legitimate, I
This
think,
is a good
spot
comp.
on comp. This is a
Yeah.
tremendous comp, and also like a legitimately realistic one. Like, he could be, if all things click, he could be AJ Brown. Like, that's what you are looking at. This isn't like, yeah, he has shades of, no, this is like spot on. Like, if he hits how he can, you are looking at a clone and a replica of AJ Brown in the NFL.
Yeah, bottom of the screen, you're running a crossing around mesh concept. You see him catch that underneath throw there, and then the
Oh,
strength and body control to run through, that tackle. That's the type of thing that he can do. And we showed him winning at all 3 levels. I just love this comp. It was really probably one of the easier ones, but it's definitely it's exciting. I think he's a guy that, if we're talking wide receiver fits, I could see Joe Brady, Brandon Bean, and how this philosophy has changed into run after catch, into yards after catch, into being explosive and needing more explosive players and guys that can separate with speed, but also with strength. He's got a little bit of everything. And maybe he isn't, a premier receiver year 1, but man, if he can get to anywhere near his ceiling, he could be better than AJ Brown. If he can get anywhere near his ceiling, he can be better than AJ Brown. He's got all the same tools, but he's got that breakaway speed to go with it. He could be a special player.
yeah, you just got to see how much you can coach him up and what
Right.
it takes to get to that ceiling. I wanted to share one quick play just because we've had multiple requests for it. That long touchdown that everyone's talking about. Here it is. That one that, again, I know you folks
Oh
are
yeah.
clamoring for. So here, I'll just play it. This one's also nice because it has his max speed calculated there, as well as kind of creep up more into that conversation lately, because he fits, because of his size and frame, with that X potential. One of the few guys in this class that really do has it from a true standpoint, and just the raw potential and size. Like, you shouldn't be able to have that athleticism, that ability to sky for the ball and move like that when you're 6'1", 220 plus, and you are just rocked up in a ton of ways. Extremely, extremely impressive movement from Xavier Legette, and someone who's been gaining steam with Bills Mafia. Someone who I think fits into the polarizing category. Maybe not as similar to AD Mitchell, but I think is definitely polarizing, is our next player that we're going to talk about here, Mr. Keon Coleman,
Yeah.
wide receiver from Florida State, who some people still believe in him. Some people are out on him. Some people want to talk about the 4.63 40. Some people want to talk about that he hit over 21 miles per hour and was the fastest mover in the gauntlet drill in the combine, which contradicts the 40. A lot of oddities potentially to Keon Coleman's game, the offense he played in, the injuries that he was playing through in 2023. But we've got some comps for him and some film for him. And he's another guy who, if his ceiling hits, given his size and frame and some of the traits that he has, he's another interesting name to potentially talk about.
Yeah, and we put, the comp as Drake London and Puka Nacua for that reason. So Puka Nacua was a guy that didn't test all that well. And we're talking, time speed, straight line speed, but his play speed, when you talk about like next gen stats, it was really good. So I think that's part of the reason why he's being referred to as the Puka Nacua of this year, because he didn't run fast, but when you watch him play, he does play faster than that. There's no doubt about it. Kind of the opposite of Mitchell, where Mitchell timed really well, but sometimes he kind of played down to his competition. But I really liked the comp of London because of how he, caught the ball with, in traffic, but his hands and his hand strength and ability to catch a ball. Keon Coleman's really good at that. You see London right here take the ball away from the defender. And you saw that in this type of play here from Keon Coleman, and that strength on the slot fade, basically boxing that dude up in the paint. He's able to reel that in with his strong hands, as you'll see from the end zone angle. I really like how strong his hands are, his ability in contested catch situations right there. Again, this is defended beautifully. That's exactly what you're supposed to do as a defender, but you see him track the ball, bring it in, and maintain the pass into the end zone for the touchdown. That is something you see on film from him a bunch, and is really one of his biggest strengths when we're talking Keon Coleman.
He makes these catches regularly against a variety of opponents. And this one really, I still don't know how it's possible. Because, like you said, the corner's in great position. He punches through the hands and he even tries to rip through. Like, I don't know how Coleman catches this initially, but let alone like goes to the ground with it. Look where that DB's arm is. Like, he manages to rip this ball through the arm of the DB and still make this catch. Like, the grip strength, the hand strength, the strength at the catch point, along with the athleticism, you see it pretty routinely from him. Like, this type of play isn't an anomaly or a one game highlight. You watch him continuously do it. And that's where that Drake London comp comes from, who London, ever since at USC, that ability to separate at the catch point, play big at the catch point, and be able to win with his hands and body control has been something that's translated well for him in Atlanta.
Yeah, again, late in the play here for London. Watch him turn his body, position his body, but then boom, hands. His hands are like magnets, right? Once that the ball's just kind of just like they drop right in there, and he just reels it in and he protects it. It's kind of like what you saw from Javon Baker, right? Where he kind of protects the ball, turns his back at times. You see that a lot in these situations. Here it is again, this time against LSU. Once again, back shoulder type throw, 50-50 ball, that elite concentration, that ability to reel it in with a guy basically leaning onto him in the end zone. Just another really good play and highlight play from Keon Coleman. I do think like he's more of a day two guy, especially probably more late day two for me. But he's a guy that would add a different element than what the Bills have had when we're talking wide receivers and, the skill position for the Bills.
Yeah, he's somebody who I have a 2 on him as well, late 2. I still like don't know what to do with him. 6'3",
Yeah.
213 pounds, 32 and an eighth inch arms, runs that 4.61, but runs a 1.54 10-yard split, like 38-inch vertical jump, 127-inch broad jump, which is 83rd percentile. So like he's got explosion and athleticism in certain areas, but is really sloppy as a route runner. And I don't know how much of that can be corrected and how much you can coach up, but just from the physical tools and the traits, like being this big and this athletic and being able to consistently dunk on dudes and play in the paint and play in the low post, even that one, like the corner is hanging all over him. He makes a hands catch out and away from his body. Like this isn't just being big and body catching. Like look at the concentration, the hand eye. And then he's got that defender's hand in his face and in between his hands trying to punch through. And again, maintains that catch. the low red zone is just a really strong area for him. Like, you can run him on those slot fades. You can get a one-on-one and just toss him a jump ball. He's kind of one of those, like, man, if you've got a corner out there that's 6'1", 190 pounds, screw it. Just chuck it up to Keon Coleman and let him go and high point that football. He's got a really fun aspect to his game, but you just see so much sloppiness and lack of refinement in his stem work and in his route running in general that I think that's where that cause for concern comes in.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. So we got, I think, 2 more guys to go through. So we got to move along before Aaron and Greg take over here for Cover One Buffalo at 9 p.m. with Joe Marino, special guest on Cover One Buffalo. So the next guy, Anthony, that we want to talk about and comp is Troy Franklin, a guy that I think has kind of fallen out of favor, especially if we're talking with the 28th pick.
He's a false god.
He's a guy that really comped to us as Jameson Williams, and I know Jameson hasn't quite panned out quite yet, but I do think he's on the verge of having a breakout season. But what are your thoughts on Troy Franklin? You know, what he's going to bring year 1, year 3, and even into the Bills offense.
You know, I was disappointed. I think like a lot of people were at his combine time, you know, running that 4.41, considering how much he flies on tape. And then also some of the stuff came in of like he was sick going into that week, and that's why he didn't run great. That's why his weight was off. He also just didn't have a great performance in general, especially in the gauntlet. But you watch him on tape, and he's just pure burner. The ability to stack corners and get downfield. The speed and the juice are very real. He can change gears in his stem and separate almost in the blink of an eye. He can run defenders off with his speed. The thing that I don't like the most is, and it's made me question like what I'm watching versus what other people are. Like, I hear a lot of people talk about how great of a route runner he is, and I don't see it. Like, majority of just what he is running those vertical stems, goes, posts, hitches, hooks, maybe an in every once in a while or a slant. I don't think there's much deception or suddenness necessarily consistently in his stem, but you see his ability to win with speed, his feel for space, his ability to get downfield. And I think that's where that intrigue comes in, and also pairs with Jameson Williams, who you're talking about. Pure burner, wins downfield, wins in that vertical aspect, knows how to take advantage of space. He's someone that you drop into an offense and you immediately have to account for him in that vertical way, either as a field stretcher and just pulling coverage or as a legitimate threat like you see here in these clips where, again, like if he's even, he's leaving, and you just can't cover him one-on-one with all that space. Oh, yeah, look at a little hesitation, and he's gone again.
Yeah, it's for him, you know, as you see the release here, I think that is one thing he does a bunch of. He kind of walk releases, right? And that kind of lulls the defender to sleep. He kind of closes the cushion, but he's walking out, but then he turns it on. And that's when you see the explosiveness. So he can definitely beat, you know, teams that want to play man coverage against him, especially press man up near line of scrimmage. Here's a little footnote for you. The number 1 wide receiver against press jam coverage was Troy Franklin. We talked about Diggs this afternoon about, you know, facing press coverage and the number 1 wide receiver facing press man coverage. Diggs was number 1 for that. So a guy like Franklin, you can see why the Bills want to, you know, have a visit with him. You see some of that nuance near the releases and how he converts, you know, just that walk release into that explosive play. And that gait, it's different. It's different. And I think it also plays a part in why he's probably not the most nuanced route runner or crisp route runner, but that right there, you can't teach. You can't teach that. You can't teach, you know, busting angles with that type of speed. Watch it from the end zone angle and how he manipulates his stride and that gait to fool the defender. Number 4 coming down right here. See him right there, change that gait, turns that guy around, makes him think that he's going to put his foot in the ground and come back across the face right there, but he doesn't. He just gets up to top speed. And I want to say he was much like Legette, you know, in that 22 to 23 mile an hour range. Like, he took off. It was like watching Usain Bolt in the 100-meter dash. Like, it was that type of gait and speed. And he covers some ground with that long gait.
And even like a caveat to being like, man, I was disappointed with his 40 at the combine. It was only like a 4.41. Like, that's still extremely fast. And if the reports are true of, you know, like he was a little under the weather and wasn't hitting what he wanted to, like, I thought he was going to run in the 4.3s. I still think he has that capability. And again, he's sitting there at 4.41. Also some fun stats for him. Amongst 110 college players last year that had at least 80 targets, he was 2nd in EPA per target, and he was 5th in yards per route run. He is an advanced metric darling in a lot of ways. When you're looking at a lot of charts and different pieces, he's in that upper right quadrant for a lot of things, usually like high in your x-axis and your y-axis. There's a lot to like with his game on the tape from a speed, field stretching perspective. I think he's another one too. What can you get out of him from a route running perspective? If you can get more of that complete package put together with that speed and separation ability, he's somebody that, can mean a lot to a team. And this is a great example. Yeah, being in that upper right quadrant here for EPA per target and yards per route run.
Yeah, thanks to Chris, our producer, for putting this together. You can see some of the top players that we've talked about already and where they stand. Being up in that top upper right. That's where you want to be. And you can see the comparisons here more from just a standard look at it. It's just some of these players are very good. They're going to be very good at the next level. In varying degrees, especially if we're talking year 1 versus year 3 projections. But another player that we haven't really gotten to quite yet, and one I want to get in before we get out of here is Ricky
Mhm.
Pearsall
Love that
from
graphic of
Florida.
him making that one-handed catch. Great job.
Sick. And,
Nasty.
then look at Adam Thielen. That's the comp we have for him. And when you guys see the film, you're going to understand why. And I'm not talking like just Adam Thielen. The clips that we're going to show are from like this past year. Like I'm talking also a few years ago when he was
Yes.
filthy with the Vikings. Just the movement is just so intentional, and it's for a purpose and a reason. He does a great job of challenging that confidence of defenders, especially when they're in off coverage, and just again creating that doubt in the minds of that defender. And okay, he's going this way. Oh, he's not. And they miss out from transitioning or opening up. He's so good at that. And I just love this comp because I think Adam Thielen really it could be Adam Thielen or better. That's how good Ricky is, especially if you're talking speed and time speed. Because Ricky, again, he showed out faster and time faster than what we thought.
Yeah, his movement on tape, I always describe it as purposeful fluidity. He's very efficient with everything he does. He's very smooth. I was not expecting him to run a 4.41. Again, like that's damn near a 4.3. Like him coming out with the same timed 40 as Troy Franklin absolutely surprised the hell out of me. He balled out at the Senior Bowl, and you just look at the deception that he creates in DBs. You have it, queued up beautifully on this one. Like sells vertical, puts his foot in the ground. You see the head nod, the shoulder lean, the body language, like the deception that he consistently creates. He's in that type of conversation with Lad McConkey in terms of like being a really highly skilled route runner, though they operate in different ways.
Jeez.
The ball tracking on this one and the over the shoulder grab, this one is absolutely tremendous. Like you're running a slot fade. This gets thrown purely over your left shoulder. He's damn near bending himself over backwards to be able to go up and make that catch. And you see this regularly, like that type of catch, the ball tracking, the hands. Yeah, man, like he's just got it in spades. And, you have a great highlight there, like the eyes and the tempo. Like, look at his eyes. Look how he paces this route. Look how he separates and gets past his man. But again, then that ball is thrown a bit outside. He tracks it, comes down with it. There's a ton to like with Ricky Pearsall. We were lucky enough to see him do a lot of this in person at the Senior Bowl, where it seemed like no matter who he was going against, he was winning consistently.
Yeah, and I don't know what his role is at the next level. Maybe early he is kind of a slot guy, but you can see it in Theilen how he knows how to attack leverage, how the defender number 6 for the Texans has inside leverage, and he just makes him dart outside and take that leverage and steal that leverage from him over the middle. That's a mismatch, wide receiver on a linebacker. And I think Pearsall could win like this very early. And then again, maybe a couple years from now, he can expand his role. There's just so much to like with him, the nuance, the route running, all that good stuff when it comes to Pearsall. And then again, the speed, who knows, what he's going to bring early on. Maybe that speed will catch guys off guard at the next level. He's fun to watch. He's actually fun to root for because he's got some swagger. He's got some of that swagger and that wide receiver diva, just like a little bit of it. And he makes some flashy catches, man, and lives up to the hype when it comes to that.
Yeah, I come away every time like I watch him and just see how smooth and technical he is. Like he's also really good at the catch point too. Like there's a couple clips I put out against Missouri, I believe, where he just gets absolutely rocked on some stuff over the middle, and it doesn't matter. He's coming down, he's making that catch. Like you can't stop him from it. And he very much seems like kind of inevitable at times, like whether it's the route running or the catch point play, his ability to consistently win in that form and in that fashion. And real quick, I wanted to show the catch that you have queued up there for the graphic. This is that one against Charlotte earlier. He's going to get rocked and comes through with it anyway. Like, dude has a boatload of talent. He's somebody that if they double dipped at receiver in the first 2 rounds, and round 1 they got like a Mitchell or Thomas or Legette, and then Ricky Pearsall is still sitting there at 60. I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with this double dip.
He's a double up. Yeah, for sure. I like that idea.
Because of how you can use him, where he can winning underneath, winning in the intermediate, and then what he provides at the third level because of that speed, but that separation and ball tracking and hands catching ability, man, like, there's just so much to like in spades. And I love that Adam Thielen comp, because there was, especially even just this Panthers year where he seemed to turn back the clock, but there was the time in Minnesota where, everybody's probably going to love this because everybody's anti-Stephon Diggs right now, but Stephon Diggs was very much like,
it was 1A, 1B. There was a lot of that. 100%.
Yes. And there was that conversation, and there were a lot of times where Diggs was the Robin to Adam Thielen's Batman, and Adam Thielen was winning almost any way that he wanted to. Dude just is a professional separator and winner at the receiver spot. And Ricky Pearsall is very much in that mold with a lot of toughness and dog to him, which honestly Thielen has as well. You have to, when you make it this long in the NFL as a UDFA out of a small Minnesota school.
Yeah. And guys, this is a fun episode for us. That kind of wraps up all of our comps. And as you can see, a lot of these guys that we talked about, they're in that upper quadrant that you want to be in, thanks to True Media. And when it comes to EPA per target and yards per route run for last year. So let us know in the comment section who you guys like when it came to this breakdown, what guys you think fit the best when it comes to the Bills and their draft slots and picks, especially if we're talking, day 1 and day 2. Let us know in the comments who you like the most and who you think are the best fits. This was a fun episode, several weeks in the making. It was nice to finally get it out of the way and to get to all the film. I didn't think we'd be able to get to it, especially with the Diggs news, but we got it all in. I hope you guys enjoyed that breakdown.
I'm very proud of us for being really good on time with this one. Like, we were much, and then major shout out to Chris behind the scenes who got some love earlier. You gotta, now what you need to do, Chris, is you need to get a legitimate library set up like that background and bring that to real life. Like, that's the expectation for you going forward.
Or just out of nowhere, like, we think it's the fake one, but you just pull in some book, you pull it out and start reading like a scouting profile or something. Like, that would be perfect.
That'd be good. Much better than my garage where I actually am.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's fair. But yeah, you got some love in the chat earlier, and we would not have been able to do this episode without you, with the graphics and the charts and anything and everything, being able to put it all together. You were an integral piece of this episode that, Eric, like you said, we've been working on for several weeks now. And even, the Stephon Diggs news kind of paired well with this conversation. And I think this is an episode that'll be very important for folks going forward in a lot of ways, because of a lot of these guys are going to be on the Bills board now, may even be a necessity at 28, or may even be a double dip option at 60, like we talked about here with Ricky Pearsall, or if some of these guys fall, or potential trade up candidates, so on and so forth. The Bills are now, they were already in the wide receiver market. They are even more heavily into it now when it comes draft time. They need some contributors for 2024 and honestly beyond. And they need them to be under cost control and effective. And like Nikki G says there, Bean fell in love with one of these guys. I'm just glad there's so many options. There's a multitude of dudes here, and there's even more. There's some really fun day 3 options as well. Oh, nice comment there from Jason saying this was perfectly cathartic. Appreciate you there. This has been a landmark day for this Bills team. We'll see what they are in 2024, given the loss of one of their top tier players, difference makers in Stephon Diggs. And we'll see how they kind of mitigate that loss in the draft with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of these options we talked about tonight, or some even more that we'll be getting into as we go forward.
Yeah, this won't be the end of the wide receiver talk. I know it's the topic of conversation this offseason. It won't be the end. I can guarantee that. We're going to have several breakdowns on the channel. We're going to start revealing who we believe are, our top 10 guys. Started to do that with, Javon Baker showing up at number 10. Try to get through some of those leading into the draft. It's not the end of the wide receiver talk. Honestly, it probably just amplified how much more studying and breakdowns we need to do because of the quantity that they're probably going to bring in now that Diggs is off the roster.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be really interesting to see where this team goes. And as shocking and as jarring as that Diggs trade was, like we talked about earlier, like we talked about in this episode, there's some fun options for this team going forward to see what they can do to change the dynamic of that wide receiver room, to change some things schematically. We'll see how that fits with Joe Brady's vision of this offense and installation, which I want to continue to say, like we've said, we didn't see Joe Brady's offense last year. He was very much adding some wrinkles and tweaks to Ken Dorsey's offense, because you can't uninstall an offense mid-season and install a new one. So he gets a full off season to really put his fingerprints and his DNA into this offense. So we'll see what that comes with as far as the players that they add. But that'll be some more conversation we have going forward in this month and in this offseason in general as we continue here in the Cover One film room. If you have not already, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video here on YouTube if you have not already. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool as well. Please rate and review and subscribe to the Cover One Film Room on those audio platforms. Please turn on notifications for the Cover One Film Room playlist here on YouTube. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome the show is. Word of mouth is great. If you thought the show was terrible or you hated us, one of us or both of us or everything, tell your enemies and try and make them watch the show and ruin their day by watching us. Thank you to everyone in the live chat for being with us, the engagement, the back and forth with each other, with us. Thank you very much to Cliff for your multiple super chats. Thank you very much to Bills Are Electric for your super chat. J-Bo, thank you for yours as well. We appreciate you folks. And again, all the support that we get, whatever form or fashion it comes in, live views, post live views, likes, word of mouth, retweets, insider subscriptions and kind words, anything and everything is greatly appreciated from us here at Cover One, and especially here in the film room. Eric, any parting words before we step away?
I'm tapped out. That's
Same.
all I got.
Yeah,
I left it all on the field. Two pods in one day.
Man,
too much news breaking. A lot of wide receiver talk. I'm done. I'm tapped
feeling
out.
like
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Like Helen Winslow Sr. in that Chargers Dolphins game from the 80s, just with the towel over the head and being carried off the field, man. Yeah, I'm wrapped. Yeah, I feel like I played like a grueling game. Just like you're starting on both sides of the field, offensively and defensively. It's an early September game, so it was like 97 degrees out, and you're just hot and you're done and you're wiped. Let's go to bed after this. For you folks, try and stay awake. Take a pee break, get some Gatorade, whatever you got to do.
Yes.
Bang it back here on the channel for Greg and Aaron and their guest Joe Marino at 9 o'clock as the channel keeps on rolling here with Buffalo Bills coverage. Until we see you next week, Wednesday, April 10th, for another episode of the Cover One Film Room at 7 p.m. Eastern. That'll do it for us here. I'm Anthony Prohaska. That's Eric Turner. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. We will see you next week for another episode of the Cover One Film Room, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Check out the Stefon Diggs detailed episode that we did earlier today with Chris Trapasso. That's up on the channel as well. Enjoy the rest of your night. Godspeed. And as always,